Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome to episode 97 of Freshly Grounded. This episode is with Annotate. Me and Liam have been around the same circle for quite some time. For a couple of years now, we've been kind of bumping into each other here and there, but we've never really had a direct conversation. And so I was really intrigued to kind of have him in and have a chat with him. I know that he's very passionate about a lot of matters pertaining to the youth. He works with the youth. He's passionate about knife crime and disabilities. And we go into all of that today. It was a really, really interesting episode. I really, really enjoyed it. It was very deep. I think it was one of our rare episodes where there was very little kind of humor. Not to say to turn it away. It wasn't anything kind of too dramatized, but it was very interesting. It was very deep, and it's lovely to be able to have these deep conversations with people, to see into their kind of life. And I was getting to know Annotate during the podcast, just like you guys, in the sense that, as mentioned, we bumped into each other a few times, but we've never had a conversation before, really, or a full-length conversation. So this was me even getting to know him, and man, he's such an inspiring person. I believe that there's going to be a lot of good coming his way, inshallah, and you can really see the sincerity in his eyes, and the passion when he talks. So a very good, interesting episode, guys. Just before we do get into it, I do want to let you guys know about Patreon. We have a Patreon account, which basically means that you guys can head over to patreon.com/freshly grounded and sign up. You would pay around £5 a month and you get episodes early. Every episode you'd get a day early, and you also get them ad free, which is a nice plus. You also get kind of a few exclusives as and when we can. You get discounts of our events. So this time around, we provided a 50% discount to tickets to everyone who is a Patreon subscriber for our episode 100. And a bunch of other cool stuff, man. But most of all, it's able to help us out. You know, it's able to help us out with regards to accommodating for guests, with regards to equipment and quality. And you guys get a cool service for it too. So head over to patreon.com, patreon.com/freshly grounded. If you guys have enjoyed the podcast, if you guys want to support it, that's the way to do that. £5 a month is around the same, maybe as same as a large coffee. Probably not a normal size coffee, but a large coffee. And lastly, guys, Hajj is around the corner. And before we know it, Ramadan will be over and everyone will be focusing on Hajj. It's something that we all have to do at some point in our lives, and we're going to be questioned on it. If we had the money and we had the means, we're going to be questioned as to why we didn't go. So I want you guys to check out Qibla Tours. It's an amazing Hajj company. It's run by the same people who own Badr Academy. It's an all-inclusive package, and it's the cheapest one I've genuinely found yet. And I don't know why, but people have questioned me why it's so cheap. And, you know, all I can say is I know the people very well. I know the information about this package extremely well. And it's an amazing package, and it just is cheap. These guys have been doing Hajj for over 25 years. You get to go with some really kind of knowledgeable people who are doing an amazing job, and I would very much so recommend it. I know some brothers who are going on this Hajj group, and you also get to go with Ustad Yahya Rabi. Ustad Yahya Rabi is going to be going this year, inshallah, as well. So you get to travel with him and to gain some knowledge, and perhaps even be able to read to him and learn some of the gems from the Quran. So check them out. Go to qiblatours.com. That's QIBLAH tours.com, or check out 2019hajj.com. Go ahead and check that out, guys. It's a very, very cool time to go, and very, very cool people to go with. Without any further ado, guys, this is episode 97 of Freshly Grounded with Annotate. Let's get into it.
And welcome to Freshly Grounded, the brand new podcast by best friends Faisal and Sam.
Huh?
I said welcome to Freshly Grounded,
No, after that bit.
the brand new podcast
And after that bit?
by best friends Faisal and Sam.
Really?
So what's the reason behind the name Annotate?
Yeah, so essentially, my bro, when I was deciding on a poetry name, I was looking at things that I felt represented my content. Do you know what I mean? Like things that were reflective of what I'm doing, who I am. So I looked at a few different words. I looked at this idea of doing something with the mixture of the word sincere and seer, like the word seer. So what it meant is that sin on its own is obviously, as we know, sin when you do something wrong, and seer as in the concept of removing the sin, yeah?
Okay.
But then I was like, people are going to think I'm claiming I'm sincere.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, can't go with that one.
That's an amazing name, though. Bro.
Yeah. I mean, I liked it, but I was like, yeah, I think it's a bit arrogant. So let me avoid that. So then I was like, what about Lars? Yeah. And for everyone that knows me, they know my full name is Liam Abdul Rahim Spencer.
Okay.
But I was like, it doesn't really sound good on the tongue. You know, it don't roll off nicely. Seems a bit forced, contrived. So I was like, something that reflects my content. And I came across the word annotate, and it was like, okay, so this essentially means something that gives greater meaning or provides greater understanding to something, right? And my content's very deep. So to understand it, often people will ask me to detail what I meant with certain phrases. So I was like, yeah, let me use this. And initially I got a bit of heat because people were like, hold on, bro, that's a verb. Like you're using a doing word as a noun, like it don't make any sense. But then after a while, people came around to it and they was like, yeah, I can't even call you Liam anymore. So like everyone around calls me Annotate.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned that you're one of the reasons you call yourself Annotate is because your words are deep and you have to kind of really think and look into the stuff. And I think that's one of the things that grabbed my attention of your about your poetry in that there's something that just doesn't feel right about watching someone do spoken word or poetry who just doesn't have any like grit to them. It's hard to put a word to it. Perhaps you can, but someone who maybe doesn't have life experiences in the things that they're talking about and stuff like that, and you see a lot of that, and it kind of puts you off that spoken word artist or that kind of poetry because it doesn't feel genuine. So every now and again when you come across someone like yourself or someone like I was mentioning the guy Broken Pen who I saw on Instagram, and MB is one of them, when you see people like that and you feel their words as they're saying it, I think it's rare. And so I think that's what, more than anything, that's what attracted me to your poetry when I saw some of it online, man. And mad props to you, bro, because it really does hit you hard. And also you can tell that you're not just putting pen to paper, you're really thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, with my poetry, there's a big thought process that goes behind it. It's like, okay, let me reflect on what I want to do first and foremost. Okay, in this particular poem, for example, I want to talk about oppression. Okay, but I want to talk about oppression in a fashion that's appealing to audiences. So when they hear it, they're like, oh, okay, I like that because it's got bars, you know, like anyone that likes poetry likes to hear bars. But I don't want these bars to take away from the meaning that's encompassed within the overall poem. So it's about kind of measuring out what makes sense to leave in and what doesn't make sense. So it's like a process of, I call them my chopping block bars, yeah? So anything I feel overall doesn't make sense with the complete content will get stripped away and I'll leave it on the chopping block. Then I'll go back to the poem and make sure that even with these bars or however you want to refer to it, it makes sense. And the people that hear it can resonate with them. So for example, one of my most recent poems is called Death Note. And one of the main themes behind the reasoning for that is that in the show Death Note, if you've ever seen it, it's just like an anime, so for anyone who likes that. And essentially in that, it's about a guy that believes he has the ability to take lives, or he has the ability to take lives because of a notebook that causes death, essentially. And he gets a god complex and starts believing that he can do whatever he likes. So anyone that is coming close to discovering who he is, he's willing to take their lives. And I was like, okay, this kind of reminds me of certain nations where they act the same way, where they act as though they have the right to take innocent lives and then claim that they're doing it for the betterment of the overall society or community or whatever you want to call it. And I was like, okay, so in this poem, I'm going to look at that theme and I'm going to match it to this overall content and I'm going to see how it appeals to different audiences. Now, when I go to different places, sometimes I perform in spaces where it's mainly Muslim and sometimes I perform in spaces where it's mainly non-Muslims. So obviously in the non-Muslim spaces, I tend to perform pieces like this because I know the wordplay usually appeals in those places. Whereas when I come to more Muslim settings, then I try to keep it a bit more storytelling. because I know it's going to appeal more to Muslims because they tend to like storytelling and things like that. So you kind of have to gauge your audience as well. But so yeah, it's a genuine process of just really trying to work out what's best.
How often do you write?
Nearly every day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, nearly every day, man.
It sounds to me that that spoken word poetry is very similar to the stand-up comedy game, which is very much so. You know, it starts as you put in pen to paper, or it starts as you just having life experiences, and then you're putting pen to paper, and kind of as you go, you're adding to it, you're trying out different methods, you're playing to small crowds, you're seeing if something works. If it doesn't, you go and you fix it. And I listened to quite a few podcasts by some stand-up comics, and so it's interesting to hear their process, and the kind of process that you're explaining sounds a lot like that. It sounds very, very similar. Do you often go to kind of like gigs and play around with something that you haven't quite finished and just see the reaction of the crowd and see kind of what lines work or what lines don't, and then kind of go and work on it?
Yeah, so essentially, recently actually, give you a prime example of that. I had this piece that I'd recently written, and I didn't like it that much, but I thought, do you know what? Let me give it a chance. Let me go to an event, perform it, see how the venue reacts to it, see if the people like it, and see how I feel personally and whether or not I'm going to keep the piece. I performed it and I didn't like the way I felt afterwards. It didn't feel like it had the level of caliber that I've tried to become accustomed to in terms of my writing as my previous pieces. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to utilize this one anymore. And the reaction to it wasn't the same as the reaction to the other poem I performed on the night, which was Writer's Block. The audience were very receptive. They were very much into it. They really liked it, alhamdulillah. But when I performed this other piece, which was called, do you know what? I can't even remember what I called it. But they didn't really react to it as much. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of gauge and understand that, okay, maybe this piece isn't working as well as I was hoping for it to do so. So yeah, definitely a process like that.
So how often are you performing?
I try to perform at least 3 to 4 times a month. Sometimes it can be tough because I do my own events.
Right,
So
JustRhyme, right?
Yeah, JustRhyme.
Okay.
So because of all the planning that goes into that, yeah.
So you run JustRhyme 3 or 4 times a month?
So JustRhyme, no way.
Okay, I was thinking
No
that was
way.
like a big
3 or 4
task.
I'm
I'm currently trying to put together episode 100, and I'm thinking once this is done, I don't want to look at another event for a couple of months.
Bro, I'd be finished if it was 3 or 4 times a month, man.
Okay, but that's cool. So you put together JustRhyme, and you're what number are you on now?
We're on 8, so we'll be going on to 8 in June.
And is it strictly spoken word poetry?
No, I wouldn't say so. We've had Musa Adnan on board in the past, and he delivered a beautiful speech regarding poetry of the past. So
Wow.
He was talking about Hassan ibn Thabit.
Okay,
Yeah, my Arabic's not the best, you know, but yeah, and it was really lovely, man, hearing him speak about that, because a lot of sisters and brothers that were there at the event on the night actually messaged him and said thank you so much. It was one of my favorite parts of the evening. So we've also recently had a singer come over. He sadly became ill on the night, so he couldn't perform, but we had him there. He was a nasheed artist, and we actually have another nasheed artist coming to one of our events in a couple of weeks. So
you do this thing, JustRhyme, and
Yeah.
how many people normally, like, what is it, like a small community thing or a big event, or how does it work?
So the crowds differ.
Okay.
The crowds have differed throughout the event process. Our biggest crowd that we ever had was at our first event. We had over 100 people.
Nice.
So it was
And
an amazing turnout.
Where do you do them?
We do them in a few places.
Okay.
So we've had some in Revert to Reality, which is a charity in Walthamstow. We've also had some in another charity destination, Physicians Across Continents, which is in Hainault. We're going to be holding an event soon also in Hoe Street, which is in Walthamstow as well, or Waltham Forest. So yeah, we've been to a couple of places. We've also done a small subsidiary event, if you will, in Brixton Library. So
Okay.
we've been to a few places.
Nice, man. It's tough putting together an event.
It's tough.
Yeah, I can
Real
imagine,
tough.
man. Do you have a good team behind you and stuff like that?
Alhamdulillah, I do. I've got some really good brothers that are involved in the process, that some of them working on the media related stuff. Some of them come by and help out on the evening. Some of them help me with the pre-planning. But in terms of the event process, because I have to get all of the artists as well as organize it and make sure everything's in order for the night, it's just hectic as you can imagine. And I'm sure you know this because you're planning your own event,
Yeah.
man. It's crazy.
Well, you're going to be coming down to the event.
I can't wait,
And you're
bro.
going to be performing, inshallah.
I can't wait, man, inshallah.
Confirmed as of today?
Inshallah, bro, I can't
Yeah,
wait. Big
alhamdulillah.
experience, man.
Was it
Big
today
opportunity.
Was it today we confirmed it or yesterday?
I think it was yesterday.
Maybe.
It might have
The
been
days are
yesterday.
like, yeah, I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, man. How you feeling about that?
Bro, I'm excited. I think it's a big opportunity for me to get exposure towards another audience that
Right.
maybe I haven't been in front of before, or people that don't know about my work. And my aim as a poet is not to just get exposure for the sake of being able to say, okay, I've got a massive following.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really cared too much for that. And obviously it can be frustrating at times when you're trying to talk about something important and you don't see the sort of traction that you would like simply because of the message you're trying to deliver. But you have to understand that all of this is qadr at the end of the day. It's all in Allah's will. So what keeps me going is that I'm trying to talk about something I feel is important. A lot of my content addresses things like oppression, domestic abuse, things of that nature, things that are really important. Lack of support is something I do speak about briefly, but more in regards to the idea of people only being willing to support you if you're at a certain stature. Whereas you also have people that will support you regardless of your stature.
Okay.
So it's a very interesting situation to experience.
But it's crazy because I think that I'm blessed in that I get to have like a lot of these discussions and deep chats with my brother who is kind of on a similar path to me. So we're able to have these discussions a lot.
Yeah.
Which I think is a pure blessing, man. To be able to have someone that you can talk to, and they understand what you're going through and they understand kind of where your head's at is such a blessing, especially when that person has strengths that you kind of have as weaknesses, and you have strengths that they have as weaknesses. And we often speak about that in the sense that people, it comes across like perhaps people are willing, or the overwhelming amount of people are willing to support you until, as long as you're not ahead of them.
Yeah.
Or as long as you're not a threat to them.
Yeah.
And then once you are, the support seems to go. And you notice that a lot in the sense of, so I was discussing with Sam many podcasts ago, and we were just discussing about how Sam gave me an amazing piece of advice once, which was the idea that if a Muslim brother or sister starts up a business or a venture, the first thing that we tend to do, sadly, as a society or as a community, is we think, oh, cool, now I can get things for free. So let's say, for example, Sam has a barbershop, and I try to go there and I try to get free haircuts or whatever. Like, oh, bro, sort me out, like Muslim brothers, this and the other. But that's more of a reason for me to pay full price for his service, because I want to support the Muslim brother in his business.
Yeah, 100%.
But unfortunately, that's not what we see. And you see in every. I remember when we were starting out with Freshly Grounded, I was trying to gain some traction with it, and everyone knows that the way really and truly to monetize off a podcast is to get private sponsorships in.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a shame that our first major deal came from someone who didn't really know who we were. Do you know what I mean? We pitched to a company, whereas I think, alhamdulillah, we're very blessed to have an amazing network of people.
Yeah.
But I'm not sitting here saying that we like anybody hates, or we received love left, right, and center. But it's tough. It's tough when you believe in something, and you got people around you who could maybe extend their hand and say, "Okay, look, you're starting out.
Yeah.
Let's do this." But it doesn't seem to always happen.
Yeah. No, I'm with you with that. I mean, for me, one of the weirdest experiences for me is that when I was going as Liam Abdul Rahim Spencer or whatever on Facebook, my support was quite big, as in my following was quite big, and the people that were backing me, even some of the more well-known names, were quite supportive of my work. They would share it and stuff. And a lot of the support that I had came from the fact that I was a revert and I had a journey to Islam that people wanted to hear.
Sure.
But for me, I didn't want to be boxed into this whole idea that that's all I am, is a revert Muslim poet. Muslim Bilal has been absolutely killing it with his stories over the years, in terms of his poetry and everything else that he's doing, mashallah. I didn't want to try and follow suit, because MB's killed that. And mashallah, he's done his thing, he's done it incredibly well. So I was like, I don't want to be boxed into this category because I'm not quite there yet. this is going to take a lot of work for me to build anyway to get to that sort of stage. And I also don't want to feel like the content I produce has to be only directed at Muslims, because at the end of the day, I like to hope that some of my content provides a sense of dawah to non-Muslims as well, because of the things that I speak about. And I feel some of my content is considerably, alhamdulillah, praise to Allah, of course, educational. So for that reason, when I became Annotate, I noticed it became a lot harder to get that support. But weirdly enough, when I went to spaces that maybe were not necessarily run by Muslims, I was getting hollered at a lot more by non-Muslims.
Sure.
Whereas when I was going as Liam Abdul Rahim Spencer, I was getting hollered at a lot more by Muslims. So it was a very interesting.
It's strange.
Yeah.
It's strange, but we haven't seemed to crack it, because I'm sure people also feel the same with us. We can't sit here on a pedestal and say no one supports us, but perhaps we don't do enough to support others ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
And so perhaps the problem is within, and there's a greater reason why this happens. But it is a real shame, and you do see it going on. How long is it that you've been a Muslim?
I've been Muslim 6 years now, man.
I didn't even know you were either,
Serious? Yeah, 6 years, man. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, man. How's your journey been?
As with everything in life, it's ups and downs, but overall, you have to appreciate the fact that you're Muslim. That's the main thing at the end of the day. My life wouldn't have the meaning it does if I wasn't a Muslim. And I understand that now, after years of kind of going through difficulties, being trialed, having my tribulations that have shaped me, made me who I am today. And a lot of those tribulations have shaped the way I am as an individual and how I compose myself in front of different people. So that doesn't mean that I put on different faces for different people, not at all. Alhamdulillah, may Allah protect me from that. But it means that I have the ability to adapt and speak to people on their level. So it doesn't matter whether they're younger than me, older than me, or my age. I like to respect people, show the same level of respect to everyone. And sometimes that means trying to adapt to the way that they communicate or the way they carry themselves.
Yeah, you do seem to have a very sincere vibe about you, and I'm conscious of constantly praising, but you do seem to have that vibe about you where it seems like you're not hiding anything, and you're very open, which is a lovely trait to see, especially with someone who is obviously trying to make it in a field, especially which is can be quite saturated as well.
Yeah, agreed, definitely.
And not viewing it like a dog-eat-dog world, do you know what I mean, is lovely, man. I wanted to touch on some stuff to do with knife crime, and the reason being is because I know that you're very, very passionate about it. The other day, I was out with my family, and we went to the dessert place. We left the dessert place, and it was at night time, and then we went home. We obviously went to sleep, and I woke up to the news that right outside, just a few hours after we had been there, someone got stabbed to death. And then they'd closed it off. And that same night, and this was just last week, that same night, in fact, it wasn't even like last week, it was just Saturday just gone. So it was about 4 days ago, 4 or 5 days ago. And what else had happened, bro, is that same night, 8 other people in London got stabbed.
Statistics
and then
harrowing.
And they called it like London's night of bloodshed. And then just a few short days later, I woke up this morning again. There's a pattern here because I'll read the news the first thing when I wake up. But I woke up again and I read one of the headlines that said that last night, within 6 hours, there were 6 stabbings in London alone again. And people got slashed in the face, and people got stabbed, and I think the one I was reading on Saturday said the youngest was, there was a boy who was 13, and again the one that happened last night, there were 6 different ones that happened last night, but one of them, the boy, there was a guy who was 17, and look, age doesn't even necessarily matter in the sense that if someone is getting stabbed, and that shouldn't be happening. Why is it that you're so passionate about knife crime? Because I've heard you speak about it before.
Yeah. In essence, because I work with young people, so I'm around people that are exposed to this sort of thing more often than perhaps myself and you. We don't, alhamdulillah, necessarily experience it on a first-hand sort of basis, whereas some of the young people that I've worked with in the past or may come across have experienced it firsthand, whether they've seen these things occur or whether they've experienced it themselves. So for that reason, I speak about these issues because I believe it's very important for us as a overall society, not just the Muslims, I mean everyone in general, to lend whatever support they can to the youth to try and take them away from this sort of criminality or this lifestyle that leads them down ultimately a path of destruction. So in essence, recently I even wrote a poem about gun crime, the rise of gun crime. And now obviously we know that, as you mentioned, knife crime is prevalent in London, in the UK in general. But there's a rise in gun crime, especially in London, over the past year or two. It's gone up significantly. Now, it's nowhere near the levels of knife crime, but it gets overlooked often simply because of what? The fact that it's not on the same level as knife crime. That's the only reason why people don't speak about it as much. So I thought I'd bring attention to that issue. But what I did when I wrote about this whole reality and its occurrences, which are far more than people may like to believe or think that it exists, I wrote about the consequences that it has in terms of families. So, for example, in this particular video, without giving too much away, because I hope you guys will go and watch Street Tales after, I speak about how it affects how it affects the children of the individual that's involved in gang crime. Because as we know, obviously, some gang members do indeed have young people, or have children, or how it affects the family around. So whether it's the siblings, whether it's the mom, whether it's the wife, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, we don't often speak about how it affects them. So this video kind of looks at what consequences exist when these things occur, and how people that are not experiencing it firsthand, as in they're not involved in it themselves, but how they have to then deal with it when it hits home, when poo hits the fan, or whatever you want to call it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And I don't even like to really say gang crime and just summarize it like that, but because it's a very stigmatized look at the reality. A lot of young people that are involved in criminal activity have been exposed to very difficult lifestyles, very, very difficult upbringings at times. Some of them have dealt with tremendous trauma that yourself and myself couldn't even imagine. But because of the way media stigmatizes young people, all we ever do is focus on the negatives. So we rarely ever see the good things that these people are doing for society. And we also know that it's mainly black males that get singled out as being the problems. So even in my video, I refused flat out to use a black male, simply because I didn't want to, follow that stereotype. Give people the impression that, okay, because this exists, it means that it's mainly black males, nobody else does it. Because the reality is it happens in the Asian community, it happens in the white community, and maybe not as much, but it does happen. So I chose to have a central character that was actually not black. So it was really interesting doing that video. And I would like to hope that it raised some sense of awareness. I mean, I performed it recently at one of the schools I work at, and some of the young people were in tears.
Really?
Yeah, man. So
when you say young people, how young are these people?
I'm talking 15, 16. So the type of age that you'd be surprised by, the sort of age that you wouldn't expect them necessarily to be crying.
Definitely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, that was a wonderful thing. Not in the sense that I want people to cry, of course not, but to know that it's hitting my audience.
Well, yeah, it's a way to measure kind of if it's actually affecting them, if they even listen.
The impact, right?
So where is it that people can watch this video?
So you can watch it on the Just Media YouTube account. It's Just Media on YouTube. If you type in Street Tales, it will come up with Annotate. Just type in Street Tales, Annotate. My channel doesn't have it, although I have a lot of other content on there, so you can also check out Annotate.
But bro, people, generally young people, and you know, I think people would still consider yourself a young person.
Yeah.
Don't seem to kind of have or always have the awakening to actively want to kind of really, really push deep matters and deep topics.
Yeah.
Perhaps they do care about them. Myself, I feel like I do care about almost everything that kind of goes on. When I see things in the news, or when I hear about things on social media, the awful stuff that's happening in society, I definitely would say that I care about it. But it seems like you go one step further to try and make a change in it, whether that be through your art form or through talking about it a lot and trying to push a movement forward. What I'm interested in is kind of what do you think gives you that mentality where you think someone has to speak out about this now and it should be me?
Simply put, bro, I think it's very easy to talk about things that don't have any meaning. I think it's very, like, it would be completely easy for me, and I mean this in no arrogant way whatsoever, for me to write a piece of poetry bigging myself up, telling you how great I believe I am. I even have a bar about that in one of my recent poems called Conceited. It's based on the concept of arrogance. And it would be easy. It's just simple. I can write great schemes. It would be fun. People would like it because people like to hear that sort of stuff. But what does it really mean? What benefit does it encompass, you know? I want my content, when people listen to it, okay, so maybe, and this is a discussion I had with somebody close to me, and I agreed with this person. I said, maybe you're right. When they told me what I'm about to tell you, they said, perhaps your content doesn't reach as many people because once people have listened to it once, they're never going to go and listen to it again. Because people are not really going to want to, plug in their earphones and hear about gun crime.
Or something negative.
Or hear about oppression on a consistent basis. Like, oh yeah, I can, I really get into this. I can vibe to this and I feel this. Obviously we don't use music, but you get my point. Like, just kind of let it be an enjoyable experience, because it's a harrowing experience. It's a reality check for some people. So not everyone wants to hear that. But for me, it's a case of, okay, I can write like this and I can provide that sort of content, but it's there in heaps. It's there in heaps already. So many people write like that. So many people offer poetry like that. I want to be different.
I believe that you are going to have your big break.
Inshallah,
because
bro.
when I think from the first time I'd heard your poetry, like I mentioned when we started this podcast, there was something different about it. Like I mentioned, there was something deeper about it, and I think that's what people hook onto. People can see. I think it's very, very easy to see through someone that's fake or someone who doesn't really believe in their message. Not saying this from an Islamic perspective, but it's often said that your gut is your second brain, and a lot of it is true in the sense of, sometimes you just feel something and you don't know why. And that happens a lot when you meet people, or when you look at people, when you hear about people. And often you might meet someone, you just think, there's something about me that's telling me to stay away from this person. Something doesn't feel right, or this person seems a bit dodgy in one way or another. I just can't put my finger on why. And then other times you might see or hear someone, and then instantly you think, there's something special about this person. I think you give off that vibe. So I have no doubt, and bro, your talent is it's there. Do you know what I mean? You can see the talent there for the stuff you put out, and you're obviously hardworking with the events and stuff you're putting out. So I think the idea of your content not getting seen as much and stuff like that, I think that will come with time, and we have to also know that Allah's timing is the best timing.
100%.
Best timing, and sometimes, do you know what's crazy is how often something happens in our life and we just think to ourselves, I know that Allah's timing is best, so I'm going to trust in his timing, but I just don't know what the reason is for this, because it does, to me and my small brain, it makes no sense. And I went through something very similar about 6 months ago, where a few things had occurred, and I thought, alhamdulillah, it's from Allah. Although I don't get why it's why Allah chose to do this, because my brain can't fathom it, because I can't see the whole picture like Allah can.
Exactly.
And then 6 months later, I sit here and I'm saying, the whole time Allah knew that it was gonna happen like this. It's mad, bro.
It's a beautiful experience.
It's beautiful, and that's why we have to trust him, even when everything in our body says, why is this happening now? So man, there's no reason as to why, even for example, even this podcast that's happening, or you coming down to the event and stuff, it all happened with a click of a finger.
Randomly.
And I've known of you for so long. Excuse me, that's my coffee that I just had. But yeah, man, I was thinking about the event and stuff, and I thought it'd be lovely to have Liam come down, man, and perform something there. I don't know if you'd be up for it, but it'd be lovely to hear one of your poems at some point today. I don't know if that's putting you on the spot, because I don't know how spoken word works. I don't know if
definitely on the spot, bro.
I don't know if a person, I don't know because I'm not a spoken word artist. I don't know if a person has to prepare, has some kind of like thing they have to do, prepare before they perform something. But
I think it's like a mental process. Like you kind of have to get yourself in the mood for it and be prepared and say, okay, tonight I'm doing spoken word or whatever you want to call it, or tonight I'm delivering my poetry. I'm ready for this. When it's on the spot, it's a bit like, whoa, hold on a sec. I'll give you a few bars at some point. Yeah, well, not a whole poem though.
Fine, maybe later. Let's hear a bit of a preview, because I would love I'm sure the majority of people who are listening to this have heard of you, but I'd love for people who perhaps haven't heard your poetry to kind of get a feel for it. So maybe, yeah. So you and Naeem, you also launched a podcast recently.
Yes, we did. Yeah,
the podcast is called
The Outspoken Podcast. Yeah,
The Outspoken Podcast. How is the kind of podcasting world treating you?
You know what, bro? In terms of guests, alhamdulillah, people have been so open to wanting to be on the podcast. I mean, I was blown away. I've even had people already. We don't have any clout in that regard, you know, in terms of being able to say, okay, we've got loads of followers. Right. If you come on our show, you're going to get loads of followers as well. Right. It's nothing like that. It's brand new. But I've had people even reaching out saying, look, can I get on your show, man? Or I'd love to be a part of your podcast. And even the people I've reached out to myself, some of them I've been expecting to turn me down and say, maybe, I'm a bit busy, you know. Every single person I've reached out to has said, yeah, man.
Amazing.
I want to come on the show. And I've got episodes booked out until June.
Wow.
That's how deep it is. Wow. I've got a guest every week until June, inshallah, of course. But that's how supportive people have been of
amazing.
it. And I think it's to do with the reasoning behind our podcast, because we didn't want to just do a podcast for the sake of it. Because the reality is not everyone can do a podcast. You know what I mean? It takes polishing yourself and your ability to speak and talk and entertain people at the same time as perhaps providing some sense of benefit as well, inshallah. So for me, it was a different thing altogether, because I can perform in front of audiences and I don't have a problem with that. But to sit and have a conversation and have people listening, that's a different thing altogether. That's something completely new to me. But we wanted it to encompass benefit. Like I mentioned to you earlier on, with everything I tried to do, I want there to be some sort of benefit within that product. So we decided what we're going to do with this podcast is we're going to talk about issues relevant to young people. We're going to focus on some issues that are affecting them, and we're going to bring in people that can discuss these issues and perhaps even offer insight into how we can support them. Now, obviously, not every single guest we have on board comes in and talks about, okay, yeah, this is what you need to do for the youth and da-da-da-da. But we've managed to, even with the guests that maybe are not involved with young people in any sense of the word, come in and they will discuss something relevant to them. Sure. So, for example, we had Tommy Ayman Evans in at one point. And the main discussion we had was relevant to poetry. Okay. But we also spoke about how the media demonizes young black males and how we don't focus on the good things they do. So, for example, he mentioned that when Grenfell happened, which was one of the saddest things that we've seen in recent years, that a lot of the young black male community came out and supported the cause. There was a lot of young black males there, and he mentioned how the media didn't really cover that. And it just goes to show you how important it is for us as a community to, when young people, no matter regardless of what their race, religion, or whatever it is, or their age, support them. Because when they're doing good things, if we show them that, okay, you're doing good things, we want to appreciate this, we want to show you that we're appreciative of this, it will inspire them and motivate them towards doing more positive activity. If of course, as you can imagine, you're always being demonized and people are always looking at you in a negative manner, are you really going to want to do good stuff? It's like the same with when you go to an institution, for example, and you're looked at immediately as this individual that your chances are slim because you're from this background and because you grew up in this neighborhood and because you're around this type of community or these type of people, your chances are slim. Rather than telling this young person that, okay, be the difference. Be the difference that you want to see. Be that person that comes out of where you are or where you've been growing up in this hardship that can show the world, okay, not all of us are going to go down this path that you want us to go down, because it's essentially a path that's been set by those in power, in essence, because they're the ones that sell this idea that these young people are going to be in this position. But someone that inspires me immensely is Muslim Bilal, because Muslim Bilal for me is proof of somebody that dealt with hardship growing up. He lived in difficulty as a youngster, and now he's become somebody who's doing things globally. The guy just wrote a feature film. Do you know what I mean? And if we inspire young people to believe in themselves, man, the world is their oyster.
We often have a lot of people kind of come onto the podcast and talk about Bilal, and we all seem to have a similar experience with him, myself too, in the sense that he's one of the people in the scene who's a lot older, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, but he's like a mentor to a lot of us.
Yeah, man.
And I think people on the outside may question why so many people speak about Bilal so highly, considering he moves quite quiet. He moves quite silently, and so it's almost like people might think, why is he being praised so much, considering we don't really see too much. But one thing that perhaps people don't know is the amount that he really puts himself out there to support the young people.
Agreed.
It's insane, bro.
Yeah.
He is like everyone on the scene's older brother.
yeah.
And there's a trait of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is so beautiful, and is that everyone who is around him feels like they're his favorite person.
Yeah.
And when you speak to different people, Bilal has that effect on people.
Yeah.
For example, when we had Nasir on here, Yarimi, he was telling us his stories about him with Bilal, and how when he just started out, Bilal would pick him up from his house and take him to the studio and help him record and really mentor him. And to this day, he still mentors him. And I've got similar stories with Bilal.
Yeah.
For when I was doing talks in universities, and I would ring him or I'd drop him a message at crazy hours in the morning, and he'd be like in a different country, and it's a crazy hour in that country, and he's giving me advice across the phone. You're going to be good, you're going to kill it, trust me, this is how you got to do it. And I'm sure you've had experiences like that. And so it's amazing how a light's not often shone on him in that way, because people don't see, on the outside, people don't see that side of Bilal.
Exactly.
But people who have had direct contact with him see that side of him, where he really, really does mentor the youngers. And it seems like he really does it sincerely, because he doesn't often necessarily get something great out of it, in the sense that even when we did Freshly Grounded, I think he was like our second guest, or our first or second guest, maybe even our first ever guest on Freshly Grounded. And he's done the same for a lot of people, like I said, with Yarimi, and I'm sure he's helped you.
Definitely.
What kind of experiences have you had with him in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, when I first sort of met him, he was very supportive of my poetry. That's one thing I noticed about him. I think the first time I met him properly was at an event run by Revert to Reality, the charity that I mentioned earlier on. Amazing charity, by the way, doing such tremendous work. But yeah, he came down, and essentially myself and another poet called Khatab the Poet had written this collaboration regarding the trials and the struggles that a revert and a Muslim that's born Muslim go through. And the poem kind of looks at who has it harder. And then when we get to the end and it comes to its conclusion, it's about, okay, we all have it hard. We all have different trials, but how can we be unified? How can we be unified? And it was very, very strong on the theme, which is our life's essence, which is Tawheed. And he came up afterwards, and you know, he really liked it. No, if I remember rightly, I don't think I'd ever met him before. I think it was the first time. And he was very supportive of it. He said, man, you guys did really well. I really liked the poem. And it's even the same thing when I went to Iman Channel, and a couple of years ago, I did their Night of Vocals tour. And I performed a piece called Forgotten People, which is based on the difficulties that the Rohingya people are dealing with as we currently speak. And he, after I finished it, he gave me some advice. But he was also very supportive of what I'd done. He said to me, you shouldn't have used the backing with your voice there, because I used, I don't know what they refer to it. I think it's called a PA version or something like that. But where it has your voice on the track as well, while you're reciting
I
over
see.
it. So what happened is
So is your voice like quite quiet though?
it's quite quiet, but it still can be heard to
I
the extent
understand,
that
yeah.
it affected my performance
Sure.
because people could still hear that, and I wasn't necessarily entirely in sync. And this was
Okay.
early into my performing days. I mean, I'd performed in smaller places, but this was probably to that point my biggest stage that I'd
How
performed
many
at.
people were you performing to there? Must have been.
I think that place, it was, I think it was about 100, 150, maybe more. It's probably more.
Because I'm sure now they're doing like 1,000 people and stuff in these events in my channel.
Well, what I know the London show that we did, that had a big audience. I can't even remember. Probably a few hundred people, definitely. And that was actually one of my greatest experiences of my life, to be fair. The reason being is because I got to share the stage with my brother, and that meant the world to me.
With your actual brother?
My actual brother.
Okay,
My brother
so-
came out on the stage.
Why was that special to you? As in, obviously, it's your brother.
Simply put, man, I got so much love for my brother, and I get emotional. Like, you probably hear it in my voice right now. Like, he just means so much to me because of who he is as an individual and his character and his ability to overcome struggles. And now he's somebody that has dealt with unimaginable difficulties that myself and you couldn't quite even comprehend, even if somebody explained it to us in its entirety, because that's how difficult it's been. But he's always smiling, mashallah. You know, this boy is always happy, and he's always appreciative of the little things that he has in life. You know, he uses everything he gets. Like maybe some people outside looking in might think, oh, you spoil him a little bit, but he's so appreciative of everything he gets. A small example would be, he has some new consoles, right? But he will always go back and play his old consoles. Now, to some people that might seem like a minor deal. That's not a big deal, but it just shows you how much he appreciates everything he's been given, because he'll still go back and play things that are years and years old, just because of the fact that he knows that somebody's bought it for him, and he wants to appreciate it by utilizing it and showing people that, okay, you've given me this gift and I appreciate this gift. And it's the same on a deeper level. You know, one of the most beautiful experiences I've had in my life, other than this stage performance, of course, was when he sort of came to recognize with the idea of me praying Salah. And one day I was kind of chilling. I was just chilling on my bed. I was on my phone, texting, as we all do, a little too much most times, to be honest. But I'm chilling on my phone, and he comes in and he says, Liam, pray.
Is he Muslim?
So, in essence, my brother has Down syndrome and autism.
Okay.
So he also has what comes along with a lot of young people that have Down syndrome, or people in general that have Down syndrome, is global developmental delay, meaning that their brains function a lot slower than someone like myself or yourself.
And how old is your brother?
So my brother is 22 in May,
But
he functions probably at the age of around 11, maybe younger than that even. So in terms of understanding Islam, it would be very difficult for him.
Sure.
You get what I'm saying? So from that standpoint, from what I understand, he's considered Muslim because he doesn't understand. Now, I think it's different with all people with Down syndrome, because some have a high level of understanding. Like, you will see yourself, there are some children that will go, or young people, or even older Muslims with Down syndrome that will go to like Medina, and you'll see them there praying and making dua. Yeah, because their global developmental delay is perhaps not as severe, so they can understand the religion. Or if they don't necessarily understand the religion properly, they understand the idea of needing to pray. So
do you think that your love for like working with young people, and that, which is what you kind of do now as a career, you don't mind me saying that, do you, working with young people?
Yeah, no, that's fine, man.
Would you say that a lot of that has to do with you kind of being raised with your brother and seeing someone firsthand experiencing difficulties?
Definitely, man. Definitely. 110%. Yeah, that's shaped me as an individual. I think just witnessing his experiences and how difficult they've been for me, how difficult they've been for my mum and my sister, how difficult they've been for him himself, has given me that kind of zeal to just want to help young people. I just feel it's so important for us to be supportive of the next generation. It's as simple as that, really and truly. And yeah, man, I just those experiences are just wonderful memories for me. Just him coming up and approaching me and saying to me, look, it's time to pray. And for some people, again, it might not seem like a big deal, but my brother doesn't understand Islam. So to him, praying, he knows it's important to me. He doesn't necessarily know why it's important to me because he doesn't understand Islam, but he knows it's important to me. And he will always remind me that it's time to pray. Even, he doesn't even, like I say it in my poem Gratitude, I don't know if you heard it, and it's 100% true. He doesn't need to hear the adhan. He doesn't need to know that it's prayer time. He just recognizes with the sort of schedule I follow.
The pattern.
The pattern. And will say, Liam, it's time to pray. And I just find it so beautiful. I truly see it as an absolute blessing from Allah, just to see that consideration that he has for other people.
So when you were sharing the stage with him at the night of vocals, what was that? What was that for you? Did you call him up, or how did that work?
So in essence, I think I was doing Gratitude on the stage, and I told him to come out. I said, look, I've got a special guest here, a few people. My little brother is going to come up on the stage and we're going to perform this piece, Gratitude. And he came out and he just stood there and he's just looking out into the crowd like, whoa, there's so many people here. And yeah, it was amazing for me. I'll never forget that day. I remember it like yesterday because it was such a special moment to me.
And how's your guys' relationship now?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, still very close, still very tight. Love chilling with him. There's honestly, man, I don't think there's anyone I love chilling with as much as him, just because we get on so much. We like the same sort of things, so we just have our little hangout time, and when we're together we just hang out, we do whatever, whether it's chilling on a PS4 or whatever, you know what I mean. We just do our thing.
I mentioned on an episode before that there's a really cool charity who focuses on specifically on deaf Muslims, and I was so inspired when I heard about this charity because there's a lot of charities doing a lot of great work, and there's a lot of charities doing a lot of great work for a lot of similar reasons, or a lot of similar kind of spaces, right? Which are very important, war zones and medical help with regards to, like, for example, cardiology or orphans. That's a big one. And it's amazing, and you can never put that work down. However, when I came across this charity and their sole kind of thing was to focus on deaf Muslims, and so the question I was going to put to you is kind of having first-hand experience with someone who has Down syndrome, and who is obviously your brother. Do you feel like there's more that all of us as a society can do to appreciate people who have Down syndrome, to empathize with people who have Down syndrome, and perhaps even kind of create more initiatives so that we can support and empower them?
Yeah, you know, it's actually wonderful that you asked me that question, because the answer is 100% yes. I do believe there needs to be more done as a society for us to understand disability in general. For me, I don't look at it as disability. That's the label that's been given to people that have difficulties. But for me, it's just a case of understanding that some people have more needs than ourselves. And to empathize with that, you have to be willing to sometimes learn a little. And even if you don't learn, put aside your preconceived judgments of people, rather than assuming, okay, this person has this disability, they can't do this, they can't do that. Why don't you see what they can do and try to appreciate that individual from that standpoint, and understand that we're all human beings. A lot of people, when they're young, dehumanize people with disabilities because they don't understand them. Now, I don't blame the young people for having certain mindsets that are only adopted through their experiences or what they're exposed to. It's up to those in these positions, say, for example, institutional positions, to provide knowledge of people that do have disabilities or are different in some ways or another. For young people to then grow up and understand that, okay, so this person, maybe they have a difficulty, but it doesn't make them any less human than myself. So yeah, I do believe that. I think it's very important. I would love to see schools adopt a focus on teaching young people about what it means to have a disability, so that young people don't just immediately look at someone that they in their mind think looks different, means that they are deserving then of being treated differently. Because if we do not educate them, how can we expect them to understand? Do you get what I mean? So yeah, I think there's a definite lack of empathy, and I think there's a lack of support as well. Even when governments strip funding away from parents that have people with disabilities, children with disabilities, how can they support them if you're stripping away those funding and those even certain benefits that they have? So groups or activities that are available, and they get cut down and less of them become available, it's not fair.
Another thing that I've heard kind of spoken about by a very inspiring gentleman who he has numerous disabilities, and he's kind of spoken about the idea that the symbol for for people who have disabilities worldwide is that picture of a person on a wheelchair. And how like off key that is, considering I remember them saying the stats of the amount of people out of all disabilities, the percentage of people that are actually on a wheelchair, and it's so low, bro. And there are so many disabilities that are either you can't see or they're just not in a wheelchair. And so to have that as the symbol for anytime you go to a bathroom and there's a men and a women, and then there's a logo of someone in a wheelchair, or the parking, etc. And basically trying to kind of push forward this campaign of that should not be the symbol for disability. It's such a small-minded way of putting a logo on the idea of disability.
Yeah, I agree 110%. I think it's just kind of a very, very, like you said, you put it perfectly, a small-minded approach to categorizing or showing something that they assume is representative of people with disabilities, when clearly it's not. As you said, the statistics show that.
The statistics show it's very, very low.
So it makes no sense.
Speaking of kind of, we were talking all about charities and stuff, and it reminded me of something that I spoke to a brother about recently. We were speaking over the phone, and so this brother, he works for a charity.
Okay.
And he was telling me that recently he's been doing a lot of work with young people, and he said, he goes, Faisal, you will be shocked at the number of young people who are Muslim, practicing Muslim, beards, everything, and they're attempting suicide. And he said something like, just this week, bro, I've met like 2 or 3 people, and they've either attempted or they've been seriously thinking about it. And the reason he rang me and told me that is he said that the brothers that he had spoken to, they were listeners of Freshly Grounded, and he said, perhaps you don't know that there are people who, for example, listen to your platform who are going through such difficulties in their mental state, that it gets to the point where they see suicide as a legit way out. And he said, bro, speak about it in your podcast, like this is a genuine thing that people are going through. And he goes, you'll be so surprised at the numbers of young men that go through that. And bro, I think that perhaps sometimes because we're Muslims, we put that aside and we think we're Muslims, so Muslims wouldn't do that. Because we know it's a sin, and we know that we shouldn't take our own lives. But the sad fact is that there's a lot of people, and I've had direct impact of someone very, very close to me who had gone through the same thing, and to see it from the inside was a very, very difficult. It was very, very difficult.
I can imagine,
but it made you realize that it's not always. Sometimes you see people and they're seriously considering suicide, or they've attempted it, and you think to yourself, but this is a very clever, logical person, why would they do it? Or this is a very practicing person, why would they do it? But the idea is that we can all sometimes get in a state of mind where we feel so caged, and we feel like there's absolutely nobody who can help me now.
Yeah.
No one can help me. I don't see a way out of this problem that I'm having, and I don't want to talk to anyone about it. And so therefore, a lot of times in a state of kind of not being, not thinking how they would like to think, kind of go towards those decisions or go to try and make those decisions. And so I wanted to talk about it on the podcast, and I wanted to first of all kind of put out a message. And very often on this podcast, we don't speak directly to the people who are listening, and and the reason of that is I want to keep this podcast very genuine, and I mentioned this to you actually.
You did, yeah.
I try and almost ignore the fact that there are people listening.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is not to ignore the people, but so that we can have the most genuine conversation ever. Because if me and you are having a conversation and you know there's thousands of people listening to you, the conversation changes.
Definitely.
But so that's why we're Freshly Grounded. We try our best to create a vibe where we forget that anyone else listening. It's just two brothers having a conversation with each other. And I know we got microphones in front of our faces and stuff like that, and so it makes it a bit more difficult. We got cameras watching us, but because of that, we try our best to overdo it on the idea of just like really saying, "Look, this is just two brothers talking." So the reason we try and ignore that it's being recorded is so that we can get the most genuine conversation out of our guests and out of ourselves. Yeah. But in kind of a change of that, I would like to kind of address everyone that's listening and to say that if anyone is listening to this podcast and they're going through some matters that seem like they are impossible to fix, all of us go through times where we are feeling mentally weak, or we're feeling like there's a challenge upon us that we just can't handle. And really, really, really and truly, one has to know that, first of all, we always seek Allah's help in every situation, but also to just open your mouth and talk to someone makes the world of a difference, bro.
Agreed. Yeah.
Honestly, bro, for me, and everyone has that person. Yeah. For me, I'm so blessed to have both my wife and my brother, and I'll either tend to go to either my wife or my brother for these things. And a lot of the times, naturally, ends up being my wife nowadays, because that's probably the one I spend the most time with.
Exactly.
And there has been times in my head where I thought to myself, I can't discuss this with my wife because I'm a man, I'm her man, and so I can't come across like indecisive or weak-minded and this thing that has happened has actually affected me to the point where I can't sleep, because it sounds like raw.
Yeah.
Why are you making yourself sound so weak to your wife? And anytime that's happened and I've actually decided, you know what, no, I'm gonna open my mouth and speak about it, it's made the world of a difference. It's helped me sleep at night, it's helped me open up that conversation, and it's helped me just feel like a problem halved really is a problem. A problem shared really is a problem halved. So so that's my message, kind of to people listening, is that we don't often talk about such serious matters here, but to be told by this brother that there's a huge epidemic and we sometimes ignore it, is to say that it's something that we should never overlook. And bro, if I was to tell you the amount of times that I go through feeling mentally like a bit low, every couple of days, bro.
Yeah, it happens, man.
Do you know what I mean? It's not like it happens once in a blue moon. So we have to know how to deal. We have to be able to speak to somebody, bro. You have to be able to speak to somebody, and it makes a world of a difference. Literally this morning, I had an issue that I struggled to sleep last night over it. And this morning I spoke to my brother on the phone, who, may Allah bless him, his son was born yesterday. So imagine how mad his life is.
Yeah.
But he gave me the time and he answered the phone and he spoke with me over it. And it made the world of a difference, bro. And I got a text from my brother that he sent me straight after we got off the phone as well. But my point in this is to show that speaking to someone actually makes a lot of difference. We got off the phone and this is the text that he sent me. He goes, this is what the text reads. He says, bro, also remember, these situations are 1 in a million, so they don't come around often. Don't beat yourself up about it. Keep focusing on your strengths. It's good you recognize your weaknesses and have time to work over them. Trust me, you're still majorly ahead of the game than other guys your age, mashallah. Imagine, bro, just seeing a text like that from your older brother, and you think, wow, it got lifted off my shoulders.
Weight off your shoulders, yeah.
That's what it was. So there's there's someone in your life, whether that's your mum, your brother, your wife, your husband, your children, your grandparents, your best friend, but there's someone in your life who will take you seriously when you say to them, there's something that's really stressing me out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
And speak to them.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Again, sometimes I think it comes back to this idea that we treat situations a bit robotically, and what I mean by that is when we're going through difficulties, especially as Muslims, some people will be like, okay, it's your lack of faith, and kind of simplify it. It's an extreme oversimplification, because at the end of the day, because someone's going through some difficulties mentally does not mean that they have a lack of faith. Perhaps they're just going through something so difficult or severe in their own personal life that they're finding it hard right now to connect with Allah the way that they want to. Sometimes all it takes is a conversation with somebody who is understanding and empathetic to get them back to where they want to be mentally. And it's about that idea of humanity, isn't it? We're all human at the end of the day. You know, we worship Allah because we want to get closer to Him. We're not robots. We don't do it just as a mundane process, just to be like, okay, I've prayed. You know, the idea is that we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We worship Him because we want to go to Jannah. That's our end goal, right? But sometimes in life, we experience difficulties that take away from our goals. And it's about finding ways back to that, finding a path that leads you back to where you want to go and what your ultimate goal is. So being around people, as you mentioned, that support you in that and can recognize with the positive traits that you have, rather than just only focusing on the negatives. Okay, sometimes you might speak to someone and they'll be like, oh, you're going through this difficulty. Well, that's because you're not doing this. That's because you're not doing that. Why not change that whole conversation and say, okay, maybe you could do a little bit more of this. Maybe trying this would work. It changes the complexion of the discussion altogether.
Yeah, I think that we also need to be conscious of being that person, being the person that we need to be that person who we would like to seek advice from, in the sense that we're all grown now. Do you know what I mean? Like we're not 14, 15-year-old anymore. So when we need to grow up in our mentality as well, and know that if someone comes to you for advice, it's very important that you take that person seriously, no matter how little or minor it seems to you. But the minute someone comes up to you and then you like make light of it, or you make a joke out of it, or you make fun of them for it, know that you could push that person over the edge. And you could make them, it might be that person who's come to you and said, bro, I feel a bit something because of this. They could have spent weeks trying to figure out if they should speak to someone about it. They finally spoke to someone about it. They told you, and you mocked them for it, and that's it, bro. That's pushed them over the edge. And they thought, you know what? That's why I didn't tell no one, and that's why I don't tell no one, because it's stupid, and I'm being laughed at. So we have to know to make sure, we have people in our lives who will take us seriously and who will support us and ride for us, and we have to also make sure that we are that person. That person too, one thing that's amazing is as you grow older, you realize that when you're younger, you find that your friends and the people who you have the most fun with are the people who every now and again there's banter that you like mock each other for it and stuff, and you have a laugh. But as you get older, you realize that your true friends are actually the people who basically never mock you and actually support you in everything you do, and it's just support. So when you say, I'm doing this, they don't say, like, they don't mock it. But they're like, wow, that's big, man. Again, I'll give an example of my brother, because it's the kind of like closest thing I can think to. You know, when you're younger and you're like going to play pool or something. If someone scores, if someone puts a ball, if someone puts a ball, you're like, oh, that was a fluke. Wow. You know what I mean? You get annoyed. But as you were like, bro, the other day I went to play pool with my brother, and I scored some like I don't know why I keep saying scored, but I put in some mad like shot, yeah. And his reaction was like, yes, go on, bro. And he's playing against me, bro. But you know that energy of someone going, yeah, bro, you smashed it. Rather than someone going, definitely. Oh, man, that was a fluke. Bro, I know that's such a minor example, but if you escalate that on a macro, bro, that energy is what we're meant to be giving to our friends.
I'm with you.
That's the energy we're meant to be giving, bro. Yeah. Because then when our friend, for example, starts a business or a new project, we're like, yeah, bro, I rate that. Or when they're like, oh, I'm going through a madness, instead of going, oh, bro, you'll be able to handle it, just go, oh, let's talk about it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's important.
I'm with you 100%. And I know I say that a lot, but it's because how much I agree with you with these comments that you're making. Because at the end of the day, we have to understand that when we give off negative energy to other people, what does it result in? Negativity. That's all it's going to do. So if we give off positive vibes to the people that we love and we show support to them, then it results in positivity usually. So even when, as you mentioned, like, for example, the trial situation, somebody's going through a trial, rather than just, acknowledging the situation and kind of being pessimistic towards it along with the person who's dealing with it, and instead you provide a positive outlook, then that person's able to kind of be like, okay, yes, this is really difficult. Yes, this trial is very much making my life a complicated experience right now. But I know at the end of it, there's a reward. That might be the catalyst for the discussion. There's a reward. Or whatever it is that you utilize as the means to benefit this person. But yeah, man, I just agree. I agree. I think it's so important that we provide positive energy to the people that we love and businesses as well. I think that's one thing that as a community we can do better in terms of supporting our brothers and sisters. I read this amazing post on, I think it was Instagram recently. I can't remember it word for word, I'll paraphrase it, but it said, you're willing to support Jay-Z and Beyonce, but you can't support your friend when they open their business.
It's true, bro. I read that as well. I read that as well, yeah.
It's mad. It's you'll pedal so much money into supporting these global brands and just keeping them afloat, but your own boy or your own girl, if you're a sister, you don't want to support them. You're like, that's a bit long still. I'm not really into your product, or any excuse under the sun. It's like, this is your boy, or this is your girl. Like, this person. You actually sit with this person. You eat with this person. You chill with this person. Why are you not going to support them? But you're going to support this person that literally, if they met you, couldn't give a crap less who you are.
Yeah.
It's mad. It's a really backwards way of thinking.
It is a backwards way of thinking, and I think that but I do also think that it requires us to be conscious of it to make a change, because
Agreed, yeah.
I think naturally the idea is that this person is on the exact same level as me. I've grown up with this person. I know this person. I do everything the same as this person. So why them and not me? Yeah. And so because of that, or because someone is so close to you, when someone is a bit more distant from you, you're going to rate them. But the minute you become a bit closer to them, it's like, why would I support their success when that could have been me? And I think that's natural to an extent. I think there's an extent to it that is natural. And you have to work hard at overcoming that. I actually spoke to one of my teachers, Ustad Jamal, about this situation. And I said to him, how do you completely knock that out of your mentality? And he said that he wants to talk. He said that this is even something that's spoken about in Islam by our pious predecessors, and he wants to discuss it with me. So we're going to have that discussion, inshallah. So perhaps we can continue this discussion later on a podcast one day when I can tell you the solution to it. But yeah, he said that he wanted to talk to me about that, and he said that that's something that's common and it exists, and Islam speaks about it. So it'll be interesting to hear about it from an Islamic perspective and see what Islam says about it and what the solution to it is.
It reminds me of the hadith actually, about loving for your brother what you love for yourself. And kind of need to perfect that, right? Bro,
it's mad because that hadith, if I'm not mistaken, says none of you will have true iman until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. Yeah. And you know what that makes me think, bro? It makes me think that true iman is such a gift, bro.
Yeah.
It's the most valuable thing on this planet is iman.
Yeah.
And so if something is that valuable, you think Allah's going to make it easy for you. So then I think to myself, then that means that if true iman is accomplished by loving for your brother what you love for yourself, it must be difficult to love for your brother what you love for yourself. Because if it was easy, everyone would have iman, and everyone can't have iman because it's difficult, because it's so valuable. So I also gave this example when it came to the reward for for respecting your parents is so high.
Yeah.
So anytime someone comes to me and they're like, bro, like, I'm being tested with my parents, and I've gone through this as well, I always say to them, look at how big the reward is for respecting your parents. Yeah. If the reward for something is that big, do you think Allah's going to make it easy for you to achieve it?
Exactly. Of course.
He'll give you testing parents. Just because Allah wants us to respect the parents doesn't mean Allah's going to give us easy parents to respect. Sometimes we might have real difficulty. Like, I just don't understand why my mum or why my dad is doing this. But under no circumstance am I allowed to raise my voice to them. So I have to think to myself, wow, why is it so hard for me to, like, I just want to But remember, Allah this is one of the biggest rewards in it. So Allah's not going to make it easy for you to attain that then all the time. Sometimes there's going to be a test involved. And that also reminded me of something else that I've forgotten now. Yeah, I've forgotten it.
On the spur of the moment things.
Yeah.
It reminds me of patience, actually. The idea of patience, because patience goes into so many things that we deal with in life. The need to have patience is so important that the reward is immensely high for it. Sabr is in essence a large part of our makeup. Everything we experience in life requires us to be patient.
Yeah.
Whether it's even when it's a positive thing, because if we go overboard with our reaction to it, it might lead us to negative consequences. So we have to kind of be able to regulate ourselves as well. And of course, when it's more so when you experience a bad situation, telling yourself, okay, right now this difficulty is troubling me, but if I'm patient, then I know that the rewards are immense. Allah has promised me that the reward for this is immense. And yeah, even it goes hand in hand with this idea of your parents as well. If your parents, like you said, maybe sometimes you don't agree with them, but it's about being patient and understanding that the reward for that is incredibly high.
This is the thing that I remembered that I had forgotten, and it was to do with that what we were just talking about parents. And it was a talk by Ustad Tim Humble, and he said in one of his talks, we have to obey our parents, obviously, right? But he said that he said along the lines of what we don't realize is that there's also a trick, or like a not a way out, but you know, sometimes your parents, they ask you to do something and you think, bruv, that's so long.
Yeah.
But I have to obey my parents, I have to do it, so I have to do something that I don't want to do. He said that befriend your parents. Mm-hmm. Because if you befriend your parents, then you can discuss with them and you can say, Mum, do you mind if I do it this way? Or do you mind if I don't do this right now and I can do that? There's nothing wrong with that. But speaking to them in a respectful way. So once you befriend your parents, it makes it easier, because when you're friends with them, you still obey them, but you can discuss it. You can say to them, I was going to do this, like, what do you think's best? And they'll go, oh, okay, I didn't know you were doing that. Yeah, cool, do that and just do this later. Yeah, so that's the kind of piece of advice, I suppose, to all of us, is to befriend our parents. Bro, Annotate, there's so much more that I wanted to go into this podcast. And I know we could talk forever, man. It's been such a pleasure having you on, bro.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, bro.
If it wasn't for us having to record this so late because of kind of it all being a last minute thing, it would have been lovely to kind of just talk for hours with you, man.
Yeah,
but it's also been nice to have a deep chat with you because, like we mentioned when we just met downstairs, we seem to have bumped into each other in the same circles a few times. Yeah. But we haven't ever actually had a proper chat with each other, have we?
It's the first time we've had a sit down and converse like this, yeah.
The very first time,
first time.
And it's been amazing, man. It's been lovely to get a window into your life. I've learned so much about you, so I really appreciate you coming down and giving us the time.
It's been a pleasure, bro.
And you did say that you'll drop a few bars for us. And so I have to hold you down to that.
All right.
If you want, we can give you some time.
I'll drop a few bars there, okay. And then I'll give a brief explanation for why they exist afterwards.
No problem. And
from a piece called Conflicted.
Okay, perfect. And bear in mind that Annotate will be at the episode 100, and so to get to kind of hear like a proper bit of his poetry and his work, you'll hear it on episode 100. And if you're going to attend live, then you'll see it there. Which, by the way, is completely sold out. Alhamdulillah.
I can't wait, man. I'm really looking forward to it, inshallah. As promised, this is a few bars from a piece of mine called Conflicted, and it goes a little like this. It's a matter of mind matters that matter. These mind matters I speak of a mind scattered and battered to blood splatters, then of a resolve shattered and fragments of hope spattered with thought patterns suggestive of battles with Mad Hatter. And that's in essence the reason I wrote those bars, for those of you that...
That's all you're going to give us? Nah, that's not possible.
I'm going to give you more,
You have to give us more. You have to give me something that I can cut into a clip and put on Instagram, you know what I mean? It has to be something powerful that we can use.
Do you want me to give you a bit of what I'm performing on the night then?
Okay.
Yeah? What I'm performing at the 100 show. All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
We need at least a minute.
At least a minute, yeah? All right. In the good old US of A, you can get shot for having black skin, kidnapped and murdered for being Muslim. In Great Britain, you can get bathed in acid by a supremacist, is shanked and beaten as a victim of prejudice. And if I'm exaggerating, somebody please explain to me why the lack of melanin is the measurement of relevant residents, accompanied by claims of white presidents, with individuals spitting the same hate as the president while preaching American reverence, like no blacks, no Muslims, no Mexicans. But growing up, I was taught that diversity is a good thing. Yet I hear him screaming, you don't belong here because of your skin, color, or your faith and religion. So what is living when this world is a prison? But hold on, wait, I'm half white. So does that mean I'm at least half entitled to white privilege? Maybe life would be all white if I was all right. I mean all right if I was all white. Like, what about those equal rights? Like, I just want to know why a man of color or Islam is harsher vilified than a white man that commits the same crime. When I was young, I used to wonder why they said the truth hurts, until I discovered how Malcolm and Luther returned to the earth. And these days when I think of the KKK, I'm reminded of Britain first, and I'm wondering what would happen if Muslims organised a protest outside of a church. I mean, I'm unsure what's worse, the fact that in some parts of the US, the KKK still operate, or that in the UK, Britain first are free to incite violence through hate.
Bro, Jazakallah khair for coming down. Thank you so much. It's been lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for giving us a piece of poetry at the end. And I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing you on the live event, inshallah. And I'm sure you'll go down a treat to everyone.
I can't wait, my bro, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, my bro. Wa alaikum salam.